Welcome back to The Legal Brief, the show where we crush the various legal myths and misinformation surrounding various areas of the gun world. I'm your host, Adam Kraut, and today we're getting back to the basics with the National Firearms Act of 1934.
The drive-by kit from RE Factor Tactical offers multi-mission capability for operating operationally from your vehicle. Whether it's to calm down your never-ending road rage, shut your stupid kids up, or actually using it properly, you decide the mission and load it up your way. Able to be detached with a quick pull of a tab, you can even take it with you for use outside the vehicle. Available in black, tan, and multicam, this mini kit is a great add-on to anyone's gear list. To get 10% off your entire order, click the link in the description to head over to refactortactical.com and use the code TGC10.
During the filming of the ITAR episode, John mentioned that he had spoken to a mutual friend of ours who asked how the show was going. Of course, it's going great, right? It also came up in the Speaking of which, what do you guys think of the show? Think it's good? It came up during the course of the conversation that a lot of things I refer to, like the National Firearms Act or NFA, a number of people have no idea really what I'm talking about, including our mutual friend. So in an effort to help you guys, I'm going to start going through the building blocks of basic firearms laws, must-knows, and this week we're starting with the National Firearms Act. The National Firearms Act was the first major attempt at gun control in the United States. To put things in perspective, prior to its enactment, prohibition was in effect, and gang violence was rather common amongst those who wished to be purveyors of fine alcoholic beverages. There were several events that led up to the enactment of the NFA, notably the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. For those of you not familiar with it, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred in Chicago, and that's when 7 men who belonged to the North Side Irish gang were murdered by members of the South Side Italian gang, led by one Al Capone. Of note, Tommy guns were used during this attack. Interestingly enough, and this was a fact that John told me when we were talking about the script, because the Tommy gun was a popular choice amongst gangsters in Chicago, and we're talking the real old school OG gangsters, it earned the nickname Chicago Typewriter. Who would have thought? As violence became more rampant amongst gangsters like Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, Babyface Nelson, John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, and others, Congress felt pressure from the public to act. As a result, the National Firearms Act became law on June 26, 1934. For those of you that think the NFA is a pain in the ass how it is now, just be very happy the original iteration of the bill did not actually come to fruition. That sought to regulate pistols and revolvers the same way machine guns are regulated. So what exactly is the NFA? The NFA originally regulated machine guns, short barrel rifles or SBRs, short barrel shotguns or SBSs, silencers, and any other weapons or AOWs. When the NFA was amended in 1968, Congress added a new category called destructive devices or DDs. It also requires that NFA firearms be maintained in a central registry known as the National Firearms Registration and Transferred Record, or NFRTR. This is the only legal registry that exists at the federal level. Let me say that again. This is the only legal federal registry. Now that we know what the NFA regulates, who can own NFA firearms? Well, under federal law, any person can. And as you probably guessed, we gotta define the term person again. A person is defined as an individual, a trust, an estate, a partnership, an association, a company, or a corporation. And this is why a trust can own NFA firearms. Now, on to how the NFA regulates NFA firearms. In order to transfer an NFA firearm between two persons, an entity, or some permutation thereof, the law requires a tax be paid. The tax for the transfer of an NFA firearm is $200, save for AOWs, which are only $5 to transfer. Back in 1934, $200 was the equivalent of about $3,500 today, making it extremely cost prohibitive for people to buy this stuff. Additionally, the transfer has to be approved by ATF. For a tax-paid transfer, a Form 4 has to be submitted in duplicate to ATF. After a copy of that form is returned to the person who's transferring the firearm with a stamp affixed to it, they can actually transfer the firearm. Additionally, with the implementation of ATF 41F, a copy of the form needs to be sent to the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, or CLEO, of the area you or the legal entity is located at. If you're applying as an individual, you'll need to provide a copy of your fingerprints and photos with the copy of the form. For those of you using legal entities, you'll be required to submit a responsible person questionnaire to ATF and your Chief Law Enforcement Officer, as well as fingerprints and photos to ATF with that responsible person questionnaire. For more on that, be sure to check out the ATF 41F video I did. If you wish to manufacture an NFA firearm and you're not a special occupation taxpayer, or SOT, who's engaged in the business of manufacturing NFA firearms, the law provides for a tax of $200 to be collected. AOWs are taxed at the same rate. For whatever reason, AOWs are $200 to make and only $5 to transfer, unlike anything else. A Form 1, which is an application to manufacture an NFA firearm, must be submitted and approved by ATF prior to actually manufacturing the firearm. The fingerprints, photos, and CLIO notification are the same as with a Form 4. So, in essence, we have two different forms, a Form 4 to transfer an existing NFA firearm, and a Form 1 to manufacture an NFA firearm, assuming you aren't a licensee and you don't have an SOT. In certain instances, transfers may occur tax-free. These occur in dealer-to-dealer transfers, transfers to law enforcement agencies, and in the estate context, like when people die. So now we know what NFA firearms are, who can own one, and what the law requires before one is made or transferred. But what about these stories that ATF can come knocking at your door and demand to inspect your firearms just because you own NFA stuff? Well, that's complete horse and an old wives' tale that is perpetuated by individuals who can't take 5 minutes to hop on Google and find out the real answer. This idiotic myth likely stems from the regulations which allow ATF to inspect a licensee without a warrant. You do not give up your Fourth Amendment rights simply because you own NFA firearms. Another common NFA myth is that you need a license or Class 3 to obtain NFA firearms. There are no licenses issued in relation to NFA firearms. Those licensed under the Gun Control Act, read those who have an FFL, can pay a tax and become an SOT, of which there are different levels. When you are purchasing or applying to manufacture an NFA firearm as a non-licensee, you're paying a one-time tax, and that's assuming you don't transfer it later on. That's it. It's simple as pie. Bonus round fun fact you can share with your friends. Firearms controlled by the NFA are called Title II firearms because they were in Title II of the Gun Control Act of 1968, which subsequently amended the NFA. More on that in a future episode. Other firearms not regulated by the NFA are called Title I firearms, well, because, yeah, you might have guessed it, they're found in Title I. And Class 3, not technically a correct term to refer to NFA firearms by. That refers to a tax status of a dealer who pays a special occupational tax. You can find those in the federal regulations along with all the other topics I covered in the links below. Hopefully that gives you a broad overview of the history of the NFA, what it regulates, that the only legal federal registry is in relation to NFA firearms, who can own NFA firearms, and some of the requirements and a few of the myths that continue to perpetuate. Do me a favor, if you guys like this episode, you know what to do. Hit that like button and share it around with your friends to help spread that knowledge. Have a question you want answered on the show? Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like the Gun Collective on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Full30, Snapchat, and wherever else you can catch us on social media. And as always, thanks for watching.
The shirts worn in today's episode of The Legal Brief have been provided by Patriot Patch. Click the link in the description to learn more.